Hey, this is Dave from metalepidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. What is up, guys? Dave here from Metal Epidemic, back with another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Australian nu-metalcore band Alpha Wolf. The band's new album, A Quiet Place to Die, will be released on September 25th on Sharptone Records. The album was recorded by Lance Prink, who did all the instrumentation. Vocals were recorded by guitarist Scotty Simpson. The album was then produced by Lance and Alpha Wolf, with Lance doing the mixing and mastering. So album number 2 from Alpha Wolf. And if you've listened to any of our podcasts or watched any of our reaction videos, you'll know we've been a little bit excited for this release.
Yeah,
just a wee bit.
The previous podcast, the one that's just come out, the one that dropped for essentially covering the August release schedule, we did a special topic, and that topic was we picked 5 albums that hadn't been released yet that we were most looking forward to before the end of 2020, and Alpha Wolf were on my list with a motherfucking bullet. You introduced me to them way back at the start of our podcast run, just as Metal Epidemic was starting to take shape into the form that it currently is at the moment. When we played one, I think it was maybe the first or second single from A Quiet Place to Die, and it floored me. I thought it sounded fucking great. And then our reaction most recently in Bleed For You, which was a song that gave us so much. This has been on the I have been super keen to check this out. It's safe to say we've always had a soft spot for Aussie metal. You know what I mean? We kind of like it, and as a result, they get instant attention from me whenever I find a band from that part of the world has a new album or something to say. The fact you then throw in the words new metal in there, even if it is nu-metalcore, you're making me happy, Dave. So
yeah, I know. Plenty of keywords.
All the keywords.
All the keywords. I actually, like, prior to these singles being released, I actually hadn't heard Alpha Wolf at all. So when the single started to drop, I was like seriously impressed, and I was like, how have I never heard of this band before? So I did go back and check out their first album, Mono, from 2017, and it's an okay album. It's quite like a very punchy, aggressive album. There's a few kind of standout tracks on it, but when I was listening, I couldn't help but feel that it did sound very like familiar. Like there wasn't a lot of personality on it for me. It sounded too similar to other bands in that vein. But then they put out an EP in 2019 called Fault, which definitely sounded more focused, and you could hear they were starting to make some tweaks, in the right direction. So you could hear straight away like the progression between the EP and these singles started to sound even bigger, not just in production, which we'll go on to, but the band as a whole just sounded far more like they were kind of like carving their own path. And now, after hearing A Quiet Place to Die in full, I'm even more blown away with this band. The singles, like, individually were awesome, but listening to the album as a whole and hearing the complete package kind of makes it even more satisfying.
This has some of the most crushing sections I've heard on a release this year. Just bits where you're hit with a fucking monster riff, a Godzilla sized fucking riff kicks in, and the production on this is so fucking ridiculous and so huge sounding that your jaw will literally drop to the floor. It's fucking scary how heavy Alpha Wolf can be. I think we are both in agreement. This thing, like, it hits hard from the first track. It bloodies your nose straight away.
So the album kicks in with the title track, A Quiet Place to Die, and it's a great kind of tone setter for the album. A nice kind of slow build up, about like 40 seconds, and then that riff just lands, and I'm pretty sure I messaged you and Kyle, and I was like, oh my god, that opening riff on that album, Jesus.
Yeah, it's fucking monster, man. I really, really, like, it's hard to describe how it's like. If you don't smile and get goosebumps when you hear it, you're fucking dead.
Yeah, I mentioned it in the reaction video we did as well, but that guitar tone is just decimating. Like,
you said the guitarist recorded the album.
Guitarist did the vocals.
Alright.
The instruments were all done by this guy called Lance Prink.
Right, give him all the money. Get him to produce this podcast, Dave.
Yeah. I mean, the tone they had on their EP was pretty meaty, but this by far is the best tone they've had on any of their recordings. So what can you expect? This album's got all the metalcore isms that you would expect and want to hear. It's loaded with huge breakdowns. There's like copious amounts of tempo changes and different rhythms. The vocals are scorching, and as we've said, absolutely thunderous production just to kind of seal the deal. But what I like about Alpha Wolf is they don't come across as just like another paint by numbers metalcore band. Although they share some of the same traits. They have
all the trappings of a metalcore band, right? But none of those trappings feel like a box ticking exercise. Do you know what I mean? So like the breakdowns, the massive sledgehammer grooves and all the rest are totally there, that all the other metalcore bands have as well. But for some reason, Alpha Wolf, when they're in their songs, they sound refreshing and vibrant and new and not something you say, oh, and here comes the breakdown. With their breakdown, you're like, oh, here comes the fucking breakdown. And I think that's what makes the difference. It's like you know where the songs are going for the most part, because you've listened to enough of this style of music, but it's exciting. It's not like, sigh, eye roll. It's like I found myself getting like listening to my headphones on and like actually starting to lean forward as like here we go. And that's a great sign. That's an absolute fucking great sign. And pulling faces when you're listening to it, see when no one's around and you're pulling faces while listening to music, like a disgusted, what the fuck is that face? That's when you know you're on a winner, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Plenty of that. There's also, like as we mentioned, they're classed as a new metalcore band, and that kind of the new metal streak that coats some of the tracks on A Quiet Place to Die really gives a kind of like a more kind of distinctive edge to this band, but it's not. When I say new metal, it's not cliche. What I mean? It's like you hear a lot of bands try and incorporate that kind of new metal style, and they end up sounding really kind of dated. This doesn't feel out of date. They've balanced it with enough like interesting twists that it doesn't feel like standard issue. But that's not the only style they've added in. If you listen to some of the kind of riff like characteristics on tracks like Creep or Ultraviolet Violence, there's a heavy hardcore influence in those tracks. And also deathcore is something they do toy with a little as well. That first riff on Acid Romance, it's got that kind of like dissonant like brutality that you'd hear from bands like Emmure. And I really dug the heavy side of this band. Like there's a lot of absolutely killer riffs on this, but it was actually more the kind of the ominous kind of side of their sound that actually caught my attention. Rotten Pieces was probably the first time I noticed it on the album, and it's a pretty crushing track for the most part, but there's a kind of layer like woven into a couple of the sections on that track that are really effective and kind of giving this a much kind of darker tone. Same with Bleed For You actually, which is the track we reacted to in one of the singles. It kind of increases or it really increases the melody through like the use of synths, and also you've obviously got the inclusion of female vocals. and it really adds like a cool dynamic to the track. And then closing track, Don't Ask. It's probably the most melodic the band get on the album.
There's a surprising lack of melody on it. Actually, it goes a lot heavier than what I anticipated from what I'd heard on the singles. And it makes sense that those are the singles that are released. And that's not a slight at them at all. If anything, when the melody does kick in on those tracks, it does feel really refreshing because they don't overplay it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for that last track, I thought there was a more kind of more emotive, like almost like a post-hardcore type vibe for the majority of the track. Although there's still some like hefty riffs in the middle of the track, but I thought they really pulled it off. It doesn't feel like out of place. I think the placement of it fits really well at the end of the album. It closes the album off really well. What about yourself? What did you make of the rest of this album?
Yeah, like this hits so many like joy points on my body. I don't even know if a joy point's even the right word. But it really did, like, this was, I was like waves of orgasm, like right through me from start to finish. I fucking like loved this right from that opening riff. I think you're right. I think there's a really strong push to be ridiculously fucking heavy on this album, but it's not that. It's weird to describe, like, because there are moments on this where they really do like emulate in some respects other bands or other styles of bands. Like deathcore is something you mentioned that they kind of flirt with and they toy with, and if Alpha Wolf wanted to be, they could very easily, with very minor tweaks, be a deathcore band. You know, the ferocity on some of these tracks is definitely in that vein. But what I like about them is that very much like to me the nu metal aspect of the band is not what you would anticipate from nu metal. It's more when nu metal started saying, well, you know what, we've got metal in our core here and we're going to bring in some funk and some rap, and it was like almost like a shopping trolley going down genres, and you pick a little bit here, pick a little bit there and put it in your cart. Like, that's what Alpha Wolf sound like. It's like they're picking a little bit of, the metalcore stuff, and there's going to be a little bit of deathcore here. Once again, there's a bit on one of the songs where I don't know if it is quite a blast beat, but it's fucking punishing. And they're bringing all these bits in and adding them in to the music here with that crushing production. And vocally, I find it absolutely ferocious at times, like to the point where it's uncomfortably heavy. But it balances really well with what they're doing. I listened to the previous release, and I would be not as forgiving as you would be. I actually don't really like the previous release. I think it is
the album or the EP?
Yeah, no, the EP is pretty cool. The album, the first album, they put their debut album, I think it's alright for what it is, but it ain't that much. And then listening to this, it's almost unrecognisable, the transformation they've taken. It feels like there's a huge amount of confidence on this album, like across everything they do. Like when you listen to a track like Creep, which we mentioned before, which I believe was one of the singles, so I think that was maybe the one we played. No, it was Akudama was the one we played on the show. So Creep was the second single I heard before Bleed For You, and I really I loved Akudama, and Creep I thought was really good as well. What's interesting is, and we've said this a couple of times before, in the context of the album though, when you come off that absolutely crushing A Quiet Place to Die, Creep totally fits, like totally gives you exactly what you need after that opening track, and it almost reshapes the sound you're going into Golden Fate and Isolate. I think the best thing they do is don't oversaturate with melody on this album, because that to me is that doesn't make them as remarkable as when they do use it. And when they do use it, it feels like it's there for a purpose. Whether it is the guest vocals on Bleed For You, specifically the female vocals, you're right, there's an ominous level of kind of tension and weird dread in the background of some of these songs, and it's layered, it's palpable. You can sense it, you can almost touch it, and I think it's either specific dissonant chords they're playing, or layers of synths, or just something in the production in the background that just makes your hair stand up on end and feel a little bit uneasy about the section you're listening to. Sounds a bit dangerous and dark, and that once again is a tool that's used incredibly well on the release. I think as metalcore or nu-metalcore or whatever they want to call themselves, as releases go, this is up there this year as one of the standouts for me. I think for sure there is literally nothing I disliked about this release. I think they could have been a bit more daring in certain parts, but then when I think about it, after saying, you know, sometimes it feels a bit like here comes the breakdown, all the rest. The chances are that if they change those songs, they don't have the same impact. So I think there's a kind of confidence in their songwriting that really elevates what they do. And I've listened to it since you sent it through. I've listened to this like 6 times, and I've not sickened of it once. I think I went actually for a run yesterday while listening to it, and it's fucking great running music as well. It's just a fucking brilliant album. It's a really, really great album, and it's not one. This is not like genre defining or like pushing with virtuoso guitars or whatever. This is just a very, very, very confident, incredibly well written album that knows exactly what its lane is and sticks to it whilst giving you these moments, more so in the production and more so in the little changes that they bring in, the little switches, these code switches of riffing and groove that make it an interesting listen above all else. Like you're digging the heaviness and all the rest, but there's just these little changes that they implement throughout their songs that make it an interesting listen to keep coming back and back and back again. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I totally agree. A very varied album, but it doesn't just tick the compulsory boxes. It likes to keep things fresh and interesting, but as you said, like these little elements that they add in, they don't overdo them at all. And then when they do bring in that melody on those few occasions, it really stands out. It's one of the things that really stood out about this album to me. Productions, as we've mentioned, it's one hell of a production job.
Crushing.
Hats off to Lance and Alpha Wolf for doing such a great job of the production. This is a thoroughly enjoyable album, it's one that you can go back to like 2 or 3 times on the trot. Like you play it back to back. A lot of cool ideas, a lot of really good heavy riffs on it as well. Rating wise, as you said, there's not a lot to dislike about this at all. I'd probably go in with a 4.5 on this one.
I'm going just a wee bit above you. It's a 5 for me.
Oh, a 5 for
I
Duncan.
fucking loved it, man, honestly. I think they nail it. They nail it. It's weird, we're recording this on the same night we record The Ocean. And the Ocean is a technically more accomplished album from front to back, no doubt about it. But Alpha Wolf, to me, have crafted something that's not in the same genre by any stretch of the imagination, but this is the pinnacle of the genre they play in. This is top tier stuff for me, and you know, in that kind of, and they can call themselves nu-metalcore. To me, it's metalcore with hints at other bits and bobs. And the metalcore genre, it's top tier. It's one of the better metalcore albums I've heard in a while. And worth the wait, man. It's weird. Like, had we not come back to do like reviews and all the rest, I would never have heard this band. I would never have heard this album this year.
No.
Nuts.
No. Nice. Oh, I'm glad you dug it. This one drops on September 25th on Sharptone Records. The album is called A Quiet Place to Die. If you want to check them out, they're on Facebook, facebook.com/Alpha Wolf Cult, but the U is a V. I'll put a little link in the description just so it's easier to find. Give this one a listen, guys. We both really enjoyed it. Hope you do too. If you want to put some comments below, let us know what you think. Feel free. And thanks for checking out the review. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care and we'll speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.